Have you ever had to wait for something you really, really wanted? At first, the waiting is kind of fun, right? While you wait, the anticipation builds because when the waiting is finally over, you know you're going to have the best day ever. But what happens when that day gets delayed? Maybe you're a little disappointed, but you can be patient. But then it's delayed again and again and again. Soon you start to wonder if it's ever gonna happen at all, or if you should just give up hope. It's not a great feeling, but it's a feeling a lot of us can identify with. And for some of us, it's because we've been waiting on God. Today we'll see how an important biblical figure named Abram waited on God, then gave up on waiting on God, and eventually learned something vital about God's character. Abram, later named Abraham, is known as the father of Judaism and Christianity. He's the guy God worked with thousands of years ago in order to set up a huge plan and promise in motion. Genesis 12 verses 1-3 says, "The Lord has said to Abram, leave your native country, your relatives, and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt, and the families on earth will be blessed through you." Abram was an ordinary guy, but this wasn't an ordinary promise. This was a big promise for Abram. In those times, having children was seen as a sign of God's blessing. So when God promised Abram a son, it was one of the greatest promises that Abram could have received. This was also a big promise for the world. God promised to make Abram's descendants God's special, chosen people, the people through whom God would work and be revealed in the world. But there was a problem. Abram didn't have any descendants. His wife Sarai was unable to have any children, and they were both pretty old. Abram and Sarai obeyed God by packing up their lives and hitting the road. But that promise about babies? That was a hard one for them to trust. Genesis 15 verses 1-6 says, "Sometime later, the Lord spoke to Abram in a vision and said to him, 'Do not be afraid, Abram, for I will protect you, and your reward will be great.' But Abram replied, 'O sovereign Lord, what good are all your blessings when I don't even have a son? Since you've given me no children, Eliezer of Damascus, a servant in my household, will inherit all my wealth. You have given me no descendants of my own, so one of my servants will be my heir.' Then the Lord said to him, 'No, your servant will not be your heir, for you will have a son of your own who will be your heir.' Then the Lord took Abram outside and said to him, 'Look up into the sky and count the stars if you can. That's how many descendants you will have.' And Abram believed the Lord, and the Lord counted him as righteous because of his faith." Abram was stuck, waiting to receive what God had promised. He didn't have a timeline or a plan, just a promise. He was officially waitlisted. After 10 years of waiting for a promise from a God they were still learning to trust, I'm sure Abram and Sarai felt discouraged and impatient. Discouragement can lead to doubt, and doubt can make us do questionable things sometimes, like take matters into our own hands. In Genesis 16, we read how Sarai took matters into her own hands and arranged for Abram to have a child through her servant Hagar, leading up to the birth of Ishmael. Ultimately, Sarai's plan backfired. God had promised her tons of descendants, but she didn't trust God would come through on that promise. And after 25 years of waiting for God's plan to come to pass, Sarah gave birth to Isaac, their promised son. But here's what's really amazing. God didn't only fulfill the promise made to Abram and Sarai, God even showed them grace by blessing the son Abram had gathered in disobedience. And I don't know what promises you're waiting on God to fulfill right now, or which promises you'll need to wait for in the future, but here's what I do know. God can be trusted. Like Abraham and Sarah, who waited for years for God to give them a child, or the people of Israel who waited even longer for God to save them, here's the message you and I often need to hear. God has a plan, but we might have to wait for it.